just typhoons and monsoons, this impossible year.
Hello guys and welcome back and happy almost Valentine's Day. It occurred to me that perhaps I should have worn the same outfit for all three of these reviews, but whatever. I'm gonna take it as a win that I even thought about doing a relevant book for Valentine's Day. That would mean that I'm continuing with my Just One Day series, and so this book today is Just One Year. If you saw my review of Just One Day, you'll know that was from Allison's perspective, and Just One Year is from Willem. I'm gonna start by saying that I prefer Allison's perspective. It's not that I disliked this book, but I didn't connect with him the same way I connected with Allison. It's perhaps because I'm a girl. What are you gonna do about that? But I also feel like I needed a little bit more from Willem. If you're unfamiliar with the series, first, go watch my other review. Second, read the books for yourself. Third, the whole idea is that Allison goes on this European trip, meets Willem. They spend a day in Paris, and then he disappears on her. She's devastated. She kind of has this whole year of coming to terms with who she is. Like, it's a catalyst to make her realize that she doesn't know herself, and she's got to figure it out. We do learn what happened to Willem. There are two things that I forgot to talk about in my last review, but considering that was just yesterday, you guys don't have to wait that long, so I wasn't going to go back and retroactively put it in there. We learn in the last book why Willem disappeared, and that is because when they were in Paris, he had encountered these skinheads who were picking on a girl. Allison comes in, helps him get away, but he had on this shirt which represents some kind of idea that skinheads don't agree with. And so after you spend the night at the artist squat, he wakes up and he is going to go get them breakfast. And then on this journey, he re-encounters those skinheads and they beat him up and he has to go to the hospital, and it takes long enough that by the time Allison wakes up and waits for him for a couple of hours, he still hasn't come back, and that sets things in motion. So we do learn more specifics about that. So here's the thing. Before I get into the other thing that I forgot to talk about in my last review, we are given the idea in Just One Day that he's a ladies' man, that he has trouble committing to anything, whether it be a girl or a job or a place to live. And so we get a very early hint that perhaps his story of going to get them breakfast may not have been the entire truth. And then towards the end, it is brought up to him, well, if you were really planning on coming back to her, why did you take your backpack with you? And I think this is a very, very good question because it points towards character. And I wished that this question of what was the truth, I wish that had been woven throughout the book, because it felt like we were misled a little bit as to his thought process and his feelings towards Allison. So I guess I'm going to jump into the other thing that I forgot to talk about. It's the whole idea of being stained. And in their vernacular, stained means being in love. And Willem has already expressed to Allison that he's never been in love, but he has fallen in love a lot of times. And I think the problem I have with that is I just completely disagree with that. And it's completely personal. You can have your own views of love. My view of love is, how can you fall in love but not be in love? Or I even struggle with the idea of being in love more than once, because for me, love lasts forever. And so I struggle with the notion that you can be in love, you can fall in love with someone, and then all of a sudden you're not in love anymore. But we're not going to discuss that. That's just why I struggle with this whole idea of being stained. From me reading it from her point of view, it just sounds like an excuse. And that's what Allison says too. She's like, you basically just want to get laid. And then when we get to his perspective, the whole stained idea comes because Allison has this birthmark. And apparently all he wants to do is taste it. Maybe this also comes from some of my inexperience with romantic relationships, But I thought that was really weird that he was gonna use this excuse of love just to lick her wrist. Whatever. It's far more romantic from her point of view than from his. But I was like, I don't understand how you can fall in love but not actually be in love. We get this idea from both of them that maybe they had been stained for a day, yet it's something that they're willing to leave behind. But I guess maybe that goes back to my ideas about what love means and how it should last and stuff like this. But you get this impression that they're both in love. That's why they're trying to find each other. And then at the end, they're both like, okay, well, maybe we were just stained for the moment. And I don't know. I just take issue with this whole idea of being stained. I think it sounds nice. I think it's a great little idea, but I disagree with Forman about that, the whole concept of what she's trying to get at with it. That goes back to Willem, where in just one day, we really don't know. Because obviously for the whole book, we feel like, yeah, he just played Allison to get what he wanted and then he left. And then at the end, we get them coming together and, hey, maybe it's mutual. Maybe he had been looking for her too. We don't really know. And so then here, the book opens with him coming to after his altercation with the skinheads. And all he wants is to find this person, this girl. Like, he knows someone is waiting for him and he's trying to get back to her, but he has this concussion. So he can't really remember things, but he has that impression that somebody is waiting for him and he has to get back to her. And so starting from there, we seemingly are believing that he feels the same way she has this entire time, that she meant something to him rather than just a warm body, until we get to the end and his friend Kate asks about why he took his backpack with him. If he had been planning on coming back to Lulu/Allison, why did he need to take everything that he owned with him? And then he has this thought process as to he had been indecisive. And so when he ran into the skinheads, he just was like, well, they'll make the decision for me. And we're given the impression that maybe he was just scared because he had never felt this way about a person before. But what I wanted from him was a little bit more confusion. How do I put this the best way? I like characters that are straightforward, but I also like characters who are complicated. And I feel like Allison is the straightforward character, and then Willem is set up as the complicated character. He's the one, we don't know where he went, we don't know what happened, we know that he's not necessarily monogamous, and that his views on relationships aren't necessarily how Allison would go about things. So while we want him to be feeling the same way as Allison, more than likely he doesn't. And so I would have preferred that theme to have continued on, and that perhaps, yes, he did want to find her. He did continue to think about her, but maybe she wasn't as important to him as she was to her. But then as the book progressed, and maybe he tried to go back to his old ways, he realized maybe she was the one. And so that I think was the reason that I didn't quite connect with Willem and with this book. In many ways, they're flip-flopped, where he had a much more interesting and complicated growth period. Willem, he seems to have things together as much as he has them together, only for him to realize there's a lot for him to work on, like his mother. And this is another thing that I consistently struggled with through, I don't even know how many times I've read this book, probably 10 times. And so you get the impression that he's kind of an afterthought in his parents' marriage, and especially with his mother, that she wasn't very maternal. But his dad had recently died. Apparently his grandfather had recently died, and he was very close to them. And so this is why he's like dust in the wind. You know, he's just blowing about because he doesn't have a home anymore. The two important people in his life are gone. His mother has just sold their home. She's off in India being a holistic doctor. He's resigned to the idea that this is his life. And that he honestly doesn't want much to do with his mother until he gets sick, and she's the person that he turns to, and through his experience there, they are able to reconnect and clear up all of the confusion between why things happened the way they happened, why she behaved the way she did, and how he feels about the way that she treated him. Through this, he also basically goes from being an itinerant to being someone with a set path and a place to live and a key to give to Allison when she shows back up at his place. And so I liked his journey a little bit more because maybe it was a little bit more concrete. There were a lot more things that he needed to work on, even though he didn't necessarily know that there were things he needed to work on. But I tend to connect with character, and because I couldn't connect with him as well, I didn't like this book as much. Still a great book, but I prefer Just One Day. Anyways, as per the plot, as I said, he wakes up in the hospital, and although this is something else, I know sometimes I talk about the narrators because most of my books these days I get through via audiobook. And so I had some things to say with Just One Day in terms of her Dutch pronunciations and stuff. And in Just One Year, it's a completely different narrator because obviously it's a guy versus a girl. And it really brings into question, what do narrators know about the books / series that they are narrating for? And if you're out there, please let me know, because this is a legit question. I honestly am trying to figure out, because in Just One Day, the doctor that takes care of him, he is French, but he speaks with a very posh British accent. In Just One Year, he's all French. And so I'm like, did you not read, or does Galeman not come in, or does Gayle Forman not come in, or does whoever produces this audiobook not kind of give you a rundown of the previous book so you can know certain details? Because you totally got that wrong, all right? Like, there's just little bitty things that the narrator got wrong for Just One Year. Anywho, he wakes up at the hospital and he's super disoriented. Eventually, he is able to find the art squat, but Lulu is gone. So he returns to the nightclub in which he and Lulu had left her suitcase to try to find something about her, and he doesn't. Then the Celine, who is I want to call her the bookie. She's not the bookie. She is the person who books the bands for this nightclub. He and her have had this sexual relationship, and she essentially is like, well, this girl left you, so now it's my turn again. And she makes her moves, and he's like, that's not what I'm here for. You're supposed to be taking care of me, which echoes something that had gone on between him and Lulu. So there's a lot of echoing, which I like. And so then he leaves her, only then to go home to the flat that he shares with some friends. Well, home. That's a very loose term. He begins to live with some friends. And they're like, what is wrong with you? You are a completely different person. Look, you're the ladies' man. Where are all of the ladies? And so then in their attempts to get him out of the house, he runs into his, I guess she could be an ex-girlfriend. An ex-lover is probably more apropos. Ana Lucia. So she kind of coerces him into a relationship, because he's like, this is what my friends tell me I need to do. This is what she keeps telling me that we need to do, so I'll do it. But he can't get Allison / Lulu out of his head. And then he remembers that she and her family always go to Mexico and stay at a certain resort every year for Christmas. He makes these plans to go, and Ana Lucia is under the impression that he is booking this trip for them. And when she finds out he's not, she freaks out. She kicks him out, and she's like, oh, you're cheating on me with some French girl, when it's actually a girl that he met in France, which clear distinction there. And I really enjoy how that is something that we get in just one day as a misconception, because Alison tracks Anna Luthia down and she learns about the French girl and she automatically assumes that it's Celine. So there's a lot of red herrings that I enjoy. Willem ends up going to Mexico. He has a really hard time getting into these resorts. Eventually he makes it in, and he doesn't find her. He even ends up going to the same New Year's party as her, but they never run into each other. He meets this girl named Kate, who owns a production company. He's an actor, but he's not an actor. So it's kind of like they connect on that, but it's not like he's like, oh yeah, you know, Kismet brought you to me and we're gonna act together and stuff. So they meet up, she drops him off somewhere, he ends up getting food poisoning, and this is when he calls his mother. She brings him to India, and then he, as I said, he doesn't like her. Like, he's upset, he's angry, he's bitter towards her. Then he feels like she keeps trying to get rid of him. Let me start over. So he goes on all these trips. Like, she has this travel agent who comes to Willem and is saying, hey, you know, mummy, which can I say how annoying that was? Whether you're listening to it or reading it, I really do not understand why she has to be referred to as mummy. I feel like it diminishes who she is and her role. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing or if it was a choice, a conscious decision that Forman made to refer to Gayle as mummy, but oh my gosh, I was like, please just call her his mom, his mother. So he comes and he's like, so your mummy wants me to set up a trip for you. One of the things he's gonna do in Mumbai is ride the camels and blah, blah, blah. And then the travel agent calls him and says, well, the camels are sick. And that's the one thing Willem wanted to do. So he is trying to figure out a way to do another camel trip. And the travel agent's like, oh, no, like, it's just not gonna work. And so then Willem's saying, well, what about flights? Like, can we extend my trip so that I can go when the camels are better? And so there's all these kind of weird red flag things that keep happening. And finally, when Willem does come home, he ends up acting in a Bollywood movie, which is interesting to me. It's something that's always stuck with me because at some point I think I read a review that claimed that he became a Bollywood star. So I kept expecting him to be some really huge actor in India, and that's the only thing that it's referring to is he was in one movie. He was a super minor role. He had a couple of lines. And so whoever wrote that review set me up for failure. He goes on to do this movie, but he doesn't let anybody know he's doing it because that's sort of how he's been living his life. He has nobody to be held accountable to. And when he arrived in India in the first place, nobody had been there to pick him up from the airport. So he assumed it was going to be the same way. And then his mother gets mad at him. Yael is like, where are you? And he's like, well, this is the deal. And she's like, well, if you'd let me know, I wouldn't have come to the airport. And I'm like, why are you getting mad at him when you're the reason that it's like this? Like, have you not recognized your role in the way that he behaves towards you? I guess not. We all have our blinders, you know? Anyways, they end up talking it out. I still don't quite understand the dynamics between all of them. I do understand what Forman was trying to tell us, in which it was Yael's upbringing that turned her into the kind of mother she was. But I felt like what she showed us expected us to accept far more than we should have. If you're not necessarily a bad mother, but if you're a distant mother, how do you expect your child after 20 odd years to all of a sudden just be like, oh, mommy, I forgive you, and yeah, let's have this relationship we've never had before? I thought it was a little bit of a reach, but whatever, that's just me. But it is something that I keep hoping I'll understand better, and I never do. Like, it never comes to me and connects with my heart. But I'm glad that they kiss and make up. So then he goes to Amsterdam because he's Dutch. So he goes home and honestly, I don't even remember why he goes home. That's really embarrassing. But anyway, so he goes back to Amsterdam and then he ends up, this is something that I'd gotten wrong in my last review. He does not act in 12th Night. He's acting in As You Like It. But so he goes to a bookstore and he finds the book, 12th Night. And then the bookseller is telling him, oh, this company is auditioning for As You Like It. So he's like, sure, why not? He does a really bad job, but he is cast as the understudy. And then eventually the lead actor, right before their first showing, gets hurt. And so Willem has to go on. And this is something I really don't understand. In his first read through, everybody is so impressed by his ability or by his performance. And then they do another read through the next day or something. And the director comes to him and says, look, you don't do your Orlando. You have to do his Orlando. And then this freaks Willem out because he's like, I thought this was my chance. I thought this was a sign. And then he's talking to Kate and he's like, don't come to the show because it's going to be terrible. And Kate's like, are you serious? That was really bad directorial feedback. So Willem ends up doing it his way, and that is what Allison sees, and then she shows up at his apartment and we end. But yeah, this whole thing with his director, I didn't understand it. I did not understand why. I mean, I get the concept of continuity, if that's even a thing. I don't act, so I don't really know how all of that works. So I guess maybe, yeah, audiences do expect the Orlando character to be similar, no matter who's acting him. And Willem does it with more vulnerability, and then the other guy does it with more machismo. So I guess seeing such drastically different Orlandos could be off-putting to the audience. I don't know. If you're an actor, please let me know why a director would do this, or if this is all just Forman's imagination. But I thought it was a little ridiculous, or not like ludicrous. Like, I thought it was, again, a bit of a reach for why Willem would all of a sudden reevaluate his choices. Kate offers him a apprentice position with her acting troupe. And so then he's like, so this is going to be my new future. So I do understand where it's leading. I just think getting there was a bit much. But yeah, so that is Just One Year. And I really enjoyed the play off of the Just One Day concept and then the Just One Year concept, because Allison's journey was based off of one day, whereas Willem's journey was really more of the year. Her path, her story was set in motion by that one day. His path was set in motion because of the year that he experienced. It kind of had to do with meeting Lulu, but that wasn't the center axis of why he did what he did. It was he needed this year to come to terms with all the things that he was struggling with within his life. Another thing that I struggle with, and this is nothing to do with the writing, this is about me needing to go back and reread Shakespeare. Sorry, I cannot say Shakespeare. And that is when we finally get to the As You Like It stuff, and we even got this in Just One Day because she's in that Shakespeare Out Loud class, and we get a lot of concepts, metaphors, themes. I'm a very visual person. It was hard for me to lock on to some of the things that were being said just because it's something that I would have had to reread just to get it, because it's just so abstract. So those are some things, like, but within that, it would kind of juxtapose the Just One Day upon the Just One Year, kind of bringing things together so that our stories are intertwining. It's not a bad thing, but at the same time, I was like, can I please have a little bit less Shakespeare? Can I just know that he's in the play? Do we not necessarily have to repeat the lines and then parse them for greater meaning? Because that has never been my style. I've never enjoyed poetry for that reason. And that is one thing I really hate within writing is, what is your theme? What are you trying to say? Or what did the writer try to say? What were they trying to convey? I don't know. Maybe he just fell in love and he wanted to find her. You know, it's that kind of thing. But that is the end. Really, the only thing that I have left to talk about is the idea of the macaron. And that's not so much of a Just One Year thing as a Just One Day that technically it would be the third thing I forgot to talk about for just one day. So there's a macaroon, and then there's a macaron. They are very different kinds of cookies. My sister went to graduate school in London, and when she was graduating, I visited with my parents, and we went to Paris for a day, which naturally made me think of this book. And I wanted to try a macaron. We went to this posh little pastry shop, patisserie, and we got a variety, and I was, again, unimpressed. However, funnily enough, I went to this event, and they had some food items catered, and a company catered macarons, and I was like, oh, great, sweet, like, I don't want to eat anything else on this table, and I really don't want to try that macaron. They were so good. I've still been meaning to go get more. And I have a feeling they're not true macarons. They're probably Americanized macarons with cream cheese frosting in the middle, which is probably why I like them so much. So I'm on the fence as to whether or not I actually like a macaron. But for all of you who keep talking about macarons like they're macaroons, they're completely different. Please stop talking about them like they're the same thing. When you call something a macaroon, you're probably thinking of a macaron. So just stop, go eat yourself a macaron, and keep it in your brain that this is not a macaroon. That's today's book. That is Just One Year. Again, I completely recommend it. And then tomorrow I will be posting Just One Night, although, oh my gosh, guys, if you've been keeping up with this month, it's been nuts. I set the bar high for myself, maybe a little too high. And so I was a little afeared for getting through this duology, especially since it had the little novella of Just One Night. And then I realized Just One Night's not a novella. It's like a pamphlet. It's very different in its voice and its writing style. And I considered not doing it at all, or maybe just tacking it onto the end of this review. But I figured, you know what? I do need to get a little closer to Valentine's Day, and I've been talking about how I'm going to read it, and it took me like an hour. It's only 60 pages, 70 pages. So I will do it, and I kind of am looking forward to it because it's so different from these books. But there we go. Come back tomorrow for like a 10-minute review. So if you want a quick review from me, tomorrow is the day. See you then. Bye.